Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together.
What if I say no?
Well, then I guess we aren't having a podcast.
It'll be just me talking to Jennifer,
and maybe we'll have an image of, see Charles doing that because he refused the recording. Right. So that is a good way to start this week's Hold My Drink podcast with Charles Love not accepting the recording. So you can see him there, everyone. There he is talking. So needless to say, we have Charles Love. I've got my counterweight co-host, David Bernstein, with me. A little bit about Charles Love. He has his own podcast, the Charles Love Podcast. He also is with Wilford Riley on the Cut the Bull podcast. You'll see I've got my bull pictures up here for you, Charles, in the background.
No bull.
And no bull. And he also founded the Seeking Excellence in Education.
Seeking Educational Excellence, not the founder.
Go ahead.
I'm one of the guys.
Go ahead. You're the head, one of the head guys. Yeah. Okay.
I take the garbage out. Turn the last to leave. Turn the light off. All that good stuff.
Okay. Well, before you tell us all about that, Charles, this is the Hold My Drink podcast. Did you bring a drink to?
I did. I have the nice, popular Columbia's Best Roast. I'm drinking coffee.
Oh, nice! And you got it in a nice mug.
Got to keep it hot. I mean, might keep me here for 2 hours. I want to still have hot coffee at the end.
David, did you bring anything?
I did. After your telling too about me having Diet Cokes from McDonald's, I decided I'm going to really, up my game. So I'm drinking a Scotch on the rocks.
They
do not have that at McDonald's.
Yeah,
no, they do not. No,
I have shamed
me.
Mm-hmm. But since then, you actually brought some cool stuff to the table, like frozen popsicle pina coladas. So you're out of the shame box now. Okay, I'm boring. Glass of wine. Cheers, y'all. Charles,
Cheers.
Sorry, singing.
I was thinking about pina coladas. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I can't sing. Don't even get me started. Okay, now I'm thinking of Florida beaches. David, you start.
All right. Well, it's great to have you, Charles. So you're a Black conservative. What is that like?
Wow, that's a heck of a way to start a conversation. It's fine. No, it's I guess like being any other guy. I don't know. It is definitely entertaining watching the discourse and watching people debate frivolous topics that won't mean anything in the end. But for me, I guess what's interesting about it, the only thing that's interesting about it is because it should be like anybody else that has a viewpoint. You're just a guy with a viewpoint, and most of the time you're just ordering food and going to work. Right. But it's interesting because people make so many assumptions about what that means. So they, even if you don't say that, just, they have assumptions about you based on your age. They have assumptions about you because you're Black and all these other things. And being a Black conservative is just another one. So I don't really I hear a lot of Black conservatives say they get hassle from friends and family or social media or wherever they go. I don't really get that because that's not really, it's part of it, but most of it is not really that. It's political stuff, and I'm not a political guy. So I think really the issue is Black Republicans get a hard time all the time, and I'm not a Republican. So when they attack me as a Republican, I was like, I wouldn't know, I'm not one, and then that ends the conversation. So for me as a Black conservative, it's totally fine. America's great. It's a wonderful country. Life is beautiful. I like being me. I don't think I would trade it, which is ironic because I don't think most of the Black people who complain about how hard their lives are in general, because they're not talking about their life, would trade theirs either. So, we all got good and bad. It's a good thing. And so, life as a Black conservative is pretty swell.
So when were you born that way? Were you born a black conservative?
I was born a black man in Mississippi. It's like The Jerk. I mean, what
The Jerk. It was
yes,
The Jerk. That's a great quote from The Jerk. I love that movie.
I was born black. Yes.
That part you were, for sure. But you weren't presumably born a conservative. Did you have some kind of like intellectual moment where you said, you know what, the politics that I've sort of lived with most of my life is not working for me, and now I'm going to declare or think of myself as a conservative?
Your listener's gonna hate me because I'm so boring. You know, I mean, and I know you hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case for as high a percentage as you think. Higher than norm, but I would guess it. I mean, there's no scientific number here. I'm just going to go, hold on. 50%. I would say 50% of those people have those stories. But most of them, really, if you really talk to them, were never liberal to begin with. They were just doing it because, they keep telling me to vote. So mama's a Democrat. Mama's like, boy, you 18 and you better go vote and go vote for Jimmy Carter. I'm kidding. I'm not that old. But, there's this say go and then you just do what mama said, right? So I was always, my mom would tell you that I was always analytical, always questioning anything to the point where the adults wanted to grab me around the neck. My neck is small because it was being squeezed for so many years. It's like all the time. I'm like, but why? But that doesn't make sense. But you know what's going to happen if you do that. But you're 9. You don't get to ask, but what you're saying makes no sense. So I just one day just decided to say, well, we have a 2-party system. We keep talking about, I don't know what the Democrats and Republicans as a whole mean. I know what that one politician says, but I don't know what they really mean. I should probably figure that out. But what I do know is white folks don't get to have a choice between 2 parties, and then I got to just vote for one. So I get to have a choice too. Who are they to get the choice? I want a choice, right? And I grew up in Northwest Indiana, and then I found out that the GOP kind of slapped me down, and they said, no, you don't get a choice because most of the positions, we don't even run anybody. So the Democrat runs unopposed. And if we do, we have that money that we have to spend as limited resources. So we don't spend money to come to your neighborhood because nobody's going to vote for us anyway. So then I never saw any Republicans. So I was just like, so I got stuck in the middle. I had a period in my life where I was kind of opening my mind to say, let me in search of finding out what does it mean to be a Democrat or Republican? What are their views and what do I agree with and what do I not agree with? But even if I started to agree less with the Democrats, I didn't vote for Republicans. I'm like, I'm not just giving you my vote if you're not going to come and ask for it. So I was in a political no man's land. Then I found a party. I realized they were back crap crazy, left that party, and now I'm in a political no man's land again. I was a Republican I voted Democrat for most of my life. I was a Republican for about 18 months, 16, something like that.
Short-lived. So when you say you're,
I'm sorry,
right, when you're a conservative, what are your views? What make you that?
Well, you putting me on the spot here. See, so it's so funny. People, but because what's funny about this, I will tell you this, is that I am part of a nonprofit that deals with education, so I'm always busy doing that. I speak a lot. It's hard to shut me up. I got a radio show and a podcast, but I'm always interviewing guests, right? Dave has been on the show. So my conversations outside of coming up with questions, it's all about you. So people think, why? So I read a lot and I understand a lot, but I never really have to give my opinion if I don't want to. Because no one's ever asking me. See, now you're putting me on the spot.
I'm asking.
Now you're putting
me on the spot. That's my job, is to ask.
Okay, so here's the thing. So what makes me a conservative is that I think, well, first of all, and I try to do this without putting any other groups down, but I just speak for me and I say that I am logical and I understand the importance of context, the importance of context. So I don't judge what is best for society or best for me based on whether it's perfect, because perfect can be the enemy of the good. And I don't do it based on whether it was the right thing to do in 1842. And I don't look at America and only look at its flaws or compare its flaws with everybody else's good and just, sweep all the other good on the rug. So I say that to say I identify as a conservative because I believe that certain principles, the things that the country was founded on, are put us in a situation where we are most likely to give the most people the most freedom that we can give them with, personality differences and legislative differences and some laws and some control you have to say and government, all that. So it's the best that we have. And some people are trying to change that. And I am trying to conserve it. I am a conservative because, and this is also part of the reason why I talk so rarely about politics. And it's because I think, like they say, politics is downstream from culture. I think that we have been losing a cultural battle in America for, I can't say when because I'm not old enough, at least 20 to 25 years. I mean, there was a cultural problem before that, but not like it is now. The shift that we're seeing now, I say, started somewhere in the late 80s to early 90s. So I was right at coming into my adulthood to see it. I started to notice it in the mid 90s. And I immediately, once I noticed it, started to speak out about it, because even though I was young, and I'm like, this is not good. And then we got to the point like we are now, where everybody turns everything you say into political. So I may argue, let's say Jennifer and I have opposing views on pick any topic out there, crime, LGBT issues, it doesn't matter. I'll say, this is what's best with society. That person will say, well, the Democrats do this, or the Republicans will do this. I don't care whether they're Democrats or Republicans. They make it political. I said, but my argument has nothing to do with politics, right? So I think being conservative, especially today, is being understanding the most beneficial aspects of traditional values and our culture as it was, decades ago, and seeing the cultural push in the opposite direction, wanting to stop that as desperately as possible.
Funny thing is, the first part, at least, because I don't know where you are on some social issues. On the first part that you talked about, the comparative reasoning that you use to understand America's imperfections and what it does well and what it doesn't do as well, I completely relate to that. And yet I consider myself basically a liberal or center left. And so it's always interesting to have these conversations about how people define themselves politically, because we're probably using different criteria to do it. And in some cases, we may be more in agreement than we realize. And I think that's always interesting to explore. But are there specific social issues that you think make you a conservative?
Well, I would counter argue your argument and say classical liberals are really conservative.
I would say that classical liberals are really liberals.
They're just not today's conservative. But they're not, though. But what makes them liberal?
Well, what makes them liberal is that they stand up for freedom of expression, free speech. They stand up for the Constitution and so forth. Now, whether that's liberal or conservative, that could go in either way. And it may be what separates a conservative and a liberal in the American context is really not those issues. It may be that it's on other issues, whether you support immigrants and immigrant rights, or how you see that, pro-choice, pro-life. Maybe those are the issues that we sort of separate the two today. I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult now because all the terms are changing. I think that's the reason why I had such a problem, and I wrote the article about both sides. It's because I don't think that there are two sides, right? There is no either. These aren't binary choices, right?
Right.
So, and David's trying to pull him out of it. He thinks he's slick. I had to watch it because he's trying to get closer to issues, and now me saying this is going to make him try to make me do it more, and I'm just going to sidestep. But because I have my opinions on every issue, but the reason I don't voice them is because it doesn't matter. It doesn't define you. You can't really use it to define my conservatism or whether I'm a classical liberal, because I could have the most staunch, what's considered Republican views on every issue. What determines whether I'm liberal, small L or not, isn't that I'm against all those things that the Democrats are for or for them all. It's what I want the government to do about it. Right. Okay. So you can be pro-choice and not think, but still, it's like, I think women should be able to do X, but I don't think it's the government's role. Or you can be like, all abortion is murder, but I don't think it's the government's role. So from a political point, you two are in the same space, but you have a totally different view on the issue. That's why, giving up my viewpoints on all these ideas seems like it's a waste of time, because people would get hung up in that. And I've had it happen before. I had somebody say, "Wow, you're the most centrist person I ever talked to." They asked me about a view, and I gave them my answer, and they were like clutching their pearls. It was like, "But you're always so fair to everybody." I was like, "Yeah, but the difference is I'm not the problem. You're the problem. You asked me my opinion. Most of our conversations is about what's right and wrong and what the government's role is. I have a really clear understanding of that, and it may not be what I want them to do, but technically, I believe that's the government's role. So do it."
Right.
But when you ask me my opinion, I give you my opinion.
Right. The three of us, I'm going to say, because I know Jennifer quite well at this point, I'd say we're all classical liberals in the sense we believe that we should preserve the liberal operating system of American society, that it's absolutely critical that we have the cultural space to have meaningful conversations, and that we should be lenient about people's opinions as much as possible, and extend them the principle of good faith and all of that. And I'm starting to think more and more that that's what defines me, because that's the biggest issue right now in my view in American political life. Like, it's not actually the role of government for me right now. I mean, although that's important, I'm not going to deny, or my opinion or my moral stance on abortion. It's ultimately, I'm much more concerned about how the cultural space to have conversations, because I think that's so critical to a vibrant society. And I'm wondering, in some sense, if we're all part of the same party now, even if we would have defined ourselves differently.
100%. That is the most important thing somebody said to me while the camera was rolling in about 3 years.
Oh,
the party thing does not matter, and my views on a policy doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is, do we understand what freedom is? Do we understand what the Constitution allows? Like, I don't care. I've always been a rule follower, and I'm like, I'll follow the rules as long as I know what the rules are. Don't change the rules in the middle of the game. So if I believe the government shouldn't be doing something, and I point to the Constitution, I get mad if you do it anyway because it's not in the Constitution. But to be fair, even if I disagree with it, if 2/3 of the population, and they send their representatives to Congress, and 2/3 of them decide that this is going to be the case, then you did those things and made those changes in the proper channels. But that's not generally what happens. And to your point, that's the reason why most of my conversations, as of late, I've been trying to have conversations with people who kind of identify themselves as liberal in the political sense that we talk about. But I see and I hear pushing back against, canceling people or calling everybody who's not Black or Hispanic racist and all that kind of thing. Because if we allow that, does anything else really matter? Right. So you think it matters what the laws around illegal immigration or abortion or policing is, when you can just openly in the culture, just like a witch hunt, just stand up and say racist, and then that person just loses a livelihood, and that's okay? Right. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, parties are about sort of priorities in some ways, right? Like, because a lot, if I'm a Democrat, there's things I've always disagreed with Democrats on, or mostly on, and Republican the same. And now my priorities are on classical liberalism. And I think it seems to me that our goal should be to create a sort of center left to center right coalition on classical liberal values of free expression of ideas. That's so fundamental to who we are. It's more important than these other issues right now. So all that's my party.
Right. So you're saying people should be adults, because what they're doing now is they're saying, I don't like what you're saying. So instead of just saying, I don't like what you're saying, or debating you on what you're saying, I want you, drummed out of society. Yes,
yeah.
You must go.
They shouldn't be totalitarians.
You must go now.
Right. They shouldn't be totalitarians. Like, I'm anti-totalitarian. And that's what those people are doing.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something you said. You said there's been a cultural shift, past decade or so. Can you put your finger on why or what exactly? Because I've got some ideas, but I want to hear yours first.
It's hard to say, because there's too many factors. So because it's multifaceted. Mm-hmm. So we can say why the people were pushing it, right? we can talk about that, but then you also have to talk about why the rest of us accepted it. What happened in the culture? Because people have always been pushing extreme ideas, right? And the masses would say, "Get out of here! That's silly. Go kick rocks." So I don't know. I'm right now. I toss this around in my head. I think the bigger question is really why the masses changed the way they reacted to it. Because we can try to figure out why. I was talking to somebody before, and they were saying they think it came from good intentions. Well, blacks aren't being treated well, so let's try to correct that and overcorrect it. Or gays were being there was gay bashing in the 80s. There was this attacks on gays. How do we fix that? Overcorrect. That might be the case. But there's always been some extremists. It's not like there's never been extreme political groups. Why there's never been murderers. Why there's never all this stuff has happened. So the real question is why the masses have started to accept it. Why people have just started to shrug or accept bad behavior. So that's more of it. So if we analyze that, that's what's more interesting. And I don't know if I've come up with a reason why. I think part of it might be some twisted version of just trying to be better and be nicer. They think nice is the answer. One of my biggest things I say, I mean, it ties to a religion thing, but it's really more, I think, now we have to find out why, separate issue. But one of the problems, what I think is probably the biggest problem, is that we have lost our understanding. I was talking earlier about logic and context. We've lost our understanding of human nature. So it could be a bit of a couple of things, a loss of religion. It could be education. It could be advances, technological and other advances. So we got this level of hubris where we're like, come on, we put people on the moon. We developed vaccines when those Luddite, the smartest people 100 years ago were dropping dead because they couldn't figure it out. We've done all this stuff. We've advanced beyond the need for religion because we can be moral on our own, all this other kind of things. So all of those came together. So whichever one had the bigger percentage, the end result was you had a society of people saying, I think we're ready. We're bigger, we're stronger. You know, Bionic Man got off the table and said, okay, we can do this now. We can fix the human. No more will we go to war over silly partisanship. No more will we be treating women different, you know, because all of these things, we can find a way to root that out of the human consciousness. People won't do it anymore. If we make us better, we make a more educated populace, and then we just pound down anybody who thinks differently, all those bad thoughts go away, and then everybody's just going to be good to each other. Not understanding that one is not natural for human nature to act in that manner, but in your efforts to force people to be better and to act better, they just act bad in different ways. You didn't stop the bad behavior. You just made it different. So I think that was part of it. I mean, there was a time I talk about these in different examples. When, you know, there was always teenage pregnancy isn't new. We have more of it, yes. But why do we have more of it? Sex isn't new. It changed the amount changed by the way society reacted to it, right? It used to be a time where if you got pregnant in 14, 15, 16 in high school and weren't married, that your neighborhood and your community shunned you, right? They would send you off to camp, and when they came back, mom would just pretend she had another baby. Now you get pregnant when you're 14 and they throw you a party. In fact, I mentioned that on the podcast before, and my guest taught me something I didn't know. They said, no, they have daycares in high school. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that? They're doing it because they're trying to solve a problem. Such a high percentage of the girls have kids. We got to do something about it. Mm-hmm. But all these things beget new problems, right? Mm-hmm. So I think some of these things happened because of reactions to a lot of factors. But the biggest thing is thinking that we can fix humans.
Yeah, we kind of normalize, dysfunction when we're, in some ways, what I'm hearing you say, like we normalize dysfunction when we are in some of our attempts at good problem solving. Mm-hmm. But, it's interesting. The reason I asked that question is because, my co-author, he talks about often, he really felt like he grew up in Virginia in the 70s, and he thought that was a golden age, the New South and whatnot. became a very, successful Harvard trained lawyer, lives, minutes from the beach in San Diego, has a, family member who is equally as privileged. And the conversation in the household is Blackness is oppression, nothing else matters. This is a family member, who's been given a lot of privileges. And so he wonders if it's not the cultural shift isn't like a generational shift in a way. And if that generational shift didn't begin with some of the new dialogue that we have around critical race theory, critical social justice, this idea of like a lot of the stuff that you write about in Race Crazy, the 1619 Project, and whether or not that's kind of shifted the generational dynamics that has caused that cultural shift.
Well, of course, I think that it's if you're talking about the chicken or the egg, that it came after. It just made it easier for the things that they were doing to happen, because now those that, if you're talking about age, those younger generations are taught this stuff in school and at the university, so it became more of a norm. We all know that. Whether you agree, even if you agree with it, people, logical, honest people who agree with it will say it's a good thing that it was taught, but they'll admit that, if you're 30, 35 maybe, when you were in college, you were taught some of these things, right? So now you're 35 and you're a professor and you're teaching these things at an elevated level. So those are facts. But it doesn't change the fact that the shift was happening before then, and there was a normalization of it that made it okay to teach it. Because, of course, okay, that 35-year-old, when that 35-year-old was in college and they had a professor who was teaching that, times were different. The administrators of the college could have just been like, you're not teaching that crap, get out of here, right? It could have been shut down then, but it wasn't. And the race issue, there's always been people talking about the problems of the Black man and the disparities and gaps in certain areas. That's not new. I mean, honest people would have to admit that the gaps are either lessening, or the gap is the same size, but everybody moved up a bit. So you can't say that poor Black kid in 2021 is in the exact same position that same kid would be in 1971. That's foolish. But those arguments were always there. I think the difference is, I still say the biggest difference is how it was, how people reacted to it, and what they slowly started to accept. So Daniel Patrick Moynihan sounded an alarm about the single household. People, called him a racist, even though he was probably, today he would be considered on the progressive. He would be in the AOC wing of the Democrat Party, basically, right? He was progressive for the time, right? He was saying it to say, hey, let's fix this, not because he had some problem with the group that he was talking about. And now we talk about how it's so much more in the Black community, but we ignore the fact that it's 40% overall. So it just got normalized across the board. You could say that about the helicopter moms. You can say that about, take the score. Remember when there was a big thing where people were talking about, well, don't keep the score, or let's have a mercy rule because we don't want the kids to lose by a certain number of points and all this kind of stuff. All this stuff was a precursor of everything you're seeing now. If somebody would have, so you're telling me, think about it. If when they said mercy rule, the adults in the room said, get out of here. You don't want to lose by 70, play harder, right? If that was the response, we would be arguing now if boys can compete in high school and in college as girls, and even though they're physically more dominant. Do you think if they had not allowed that progression in the late 80s and the early 90s, that today we will be having this, strongly considering this argument? Not saying that people wouldn't be pushing it. Would society be strongly pushing it and considering it, saying, well, maybe boys can, if they say their girls can compete against women, even though they win 98% of the time? Sounds fair. Do you think that would still be happening if we had been slowing down the other things 15 years ago? Because I would argue no.
Mm-hmm. So you say it's a progression. It's been adding on to each other, on to itself for years now.
Yeah, it has. And we see it, and it's not just one thing. It was like onslaught. It wasn't just one thing, it was every aspect. It was crime. When I grew up, there was crime in the Black community. There were crime in certain areas. There were more crime in poor areas than other areas, but there was crime. But people didn't condone it. People weren't like, well, it's systemic racism that made Johnny shoot somebody. We'd be like, stay the hell away from Johnny. That nigga crazy. That's what they would say. They're like, man, don't go over there by them. Don't mess around with them. You hang out with him, you're gonna be in jail or shot. It was just cool. Nobody got mad when you said it. People were like, yeah, and then they're going about their life. Now you say that, it was like, well, why do you think Johnny shot that guy? Systemic racism, the white man. And people are like, yeah, that makes sense. There's no way they would have said that then. Mm-hmm. I talked to one of my progressive friends, and it hurts me, but I knew it, and I just wanted to lay it out. I said, so, and I like to paint pictures when I describe my point so people can understand. You don't want to make it too complicated. Poor Black girl, smart, came from the hood, got a scholarship to a top school. She's going to Harvard. Let's put her at Harvard. She's going to Harvard, but her family's poor. She still wants to help her family. So she got a full ride, but she took a part-time job at a convenience store so she can send money home, help the family. Maybe she's the oldest kid. So she's got a day off. Somebody needs a day off, offers her a shift so she can pick up the shift, make some more money. So she goes in on a day off to pick up a shift. She's at work behind the counter. Somebody comes in to rob the liquor store. They put a gun in her face and say, give me the money. She opens the register. She gives them the money. The guy shoots her anyway. Right? He leaves the store. She dies. They catch the guy. And I'm talking to my liberal friend, and they're like, what do you, so they catch the guy. The guy's Black. What do you do? And I said, well, we need to consider his background, his childhood, what has happened to him in the past, the way he lived, to understand what led him to that point. When you talk about sentencing, you can't just throw the book at him. You got to be there. And I said, I don't even have a problem with you bringing up the subject of his past and his situation to try to be kind to him, because kindness is good. My issue is you thought about him first and not the girl who was also Black from the poor neighborhood who got shot in the face. Mm-hmm. And we get that all the time. Somebody gets arrested. It's like, well, what happened? Oh, why? I mean, we have to understand why these people do it. They don't just do it for other reasons. Well, first of all, some people do, right? We act as if there's this poverty thing. There's something about being poor, and there's a light switch. So there's a level. Once your income, household income level hits a certain part, you all run out the house and just start robbing people. But if we sit back and think, we all know that's not true. And even in the Black community, we knew poor people in our generation or the generation before, and most of them weren't stealing things. And to be fair, it's not a generational thing. Let's be fair. Most Black people and most poor people today don't steal and don't shoot people. So when somebody shoots somebody, don't say it's because they were poor, because what about the 98% of Black people and the 98% of poor people who don't shoot people? Mm-hmm. So don't say poverty made them do it.
Right. So I have a question for you. This one has been like sitting with me for a while. There's a lot of talk about systemic racism, and it is the main explanatory factor for why there's disparity among groups. And sometimes when I'll say, listen, I think there is systemic racism, but I don't want to suggest that it always explains all disparity, because I think there are other factors that might explain disparity depending on the context. Let's be able to talk about that. The woke person will say, well, what other possible explanations might you give? And they almost are setting a trap, it seems to me, that they want you to say culture. And if you do, then they can call you a racist and dismiss everything you've said. And yet I feel like we haven't done a good job. Those of us who want to talk sensitively and thoughtfully about culture, we're not trying to treat it as, we're not trying to demean anybody. We're just trying to be honest. As someone recently said to me, clear eyes, but full heart about the problems in society. We want to be honest about it. And yet I don't think we've developed a vocabulary for talking about it. I don't think we've said, when they say, well, give me the other explanation other than critical race theory or systemic racism or whatever, we don't have this word that explains what it is and then resonates with people as something that we are able to talk about in public. Do you agree with that? Am I wrong? Or how would you talk about these issues?
Well, I would first encourage everyone to get a copy of Race Crazy and read that 2 or 3 times, and then go read We Want Equality, my previous books, read that a couple times, and then you'll have all the answers. Well, first, I get why you do it, but you saw me pretend to be ticking over here. You can't say there is systemic racism. Whether you agree with it or not, I'm sorry. You agree. We agreed earlier. You set the groundwork that what liberalism is and what's most important and what you think is an issue. You cannot win that fight once you concede that ground. You are now unstable and off balance. You will lose that debate.
If I say that
you cannot win by giving them their argument that there's systemic racism.
Well, let me push back on you for a second. I'm not saying America is systemically racist. I'm saying that I think I can point to institutions or specific examples when a system or structure is rigged against Black people.
Give me one.
I think that there are examples of it in the criminal justice system. There was a great podcast that Barry Weiss had that I was just listening to on the car ride before this, and she was talking about how there are certain that sickle cell anemia is way underfunded compared to cystic fibrosis, which is much more of a white-oriented disease. So
underfunded by whom?
By the government.
And
even though that it's 4 times more. Well, that I switched gears.
You me up. Okay, you switched.
Okay, I switched gears. I switched gears.
Okay,
but I even with criminal justice, I could come up with an example where I think that there's probably some evidence.
I love this because every example you come up with, I will destroy.
Right. You might be able to, but that's where the conversation.
100% I can.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. But
give me one. We can do your sickle cell if you want to.
Okay, let's go for it. You go destroy that one.
So in order to decide whether it's because I'm not saying that there's not discrepancies. That's what I'm arguing. To say it's the systemic, you must be saying that there's a clear intentional reason that the government is doing that, and the reason that they're doing it is to treat Blacks unfairly.
Well, the systemic racism people would say it doesn't matter if it's intentional or not.
Of course it does. They're wrong. Because
they'll say that that's the whole point.
I know they'll say that, but you won't say that. When you say systemic racism, that's not what you say. And to them saying that the problem is, and I know they won't say that because I know them like I know myself. I live among them. And I know that's what they'll say. But the problem is, the reason they lose is because they say every discrepancy is. And it doesn't matter what the intention is. So they eliminate every other factor. So that would be.
That's what they're trying to do. That's the whole thing behind all of this is to eliminate all other factors. It's like what Jonathan Haidt said, CRT is cuckoo, not because it's crazy, but it's like a cuckoo bird that won't allow any other birds' eggs in its nest and will push them out. That's what CRT is, or what this systemic racism is. It doesn't want us to talk about any other factors.
Right. I mean, I know that, but what I'm saying is, that's 100% true. And you can't argue with them on that point because they're going to say that's the case regardless of what you say. But the bottom line is, if every discrepancy is racism, why is every discrepancy only racism when it disproportionately affects Black people?
Right.
Now,
it doesn't have to be, but it is possible that there are certain.
No, I'm talking about their argument. Right. You're trying to throw me off, Dave. I need to know which argument are we talking about? Your argument or their argument?
Right. Okay. Let's go with intent. Okay. Let's go with the intent piece of it. Okay. So let me come up with a better example of that, because I think you could argue that it's very possible that on the case of cystic fibrosis versus sickle cell anemia, that's not intentional, that there's all kinds of other factors that would explain why one is funded better than the other, right? But let's go with, let's say, this Louisiana's policy around implementing its drug laws. A few years ago, I watched this incredible documentary about the criminal justice system and what was wrong with it. And you had a group of sheriffs say, look, right now the state cannot afford to sustain all these state prisons. So they're sending prisoners over to us at the local level. And we're making a lot of money, and we're incentivized, they implicated, that we can go out and put all these people in jail on low-level low-level drug charges, and they were putting these people in jail like for 2 ounces of marijuana for 10 years because it actually financially benefited them, and almost all those folks were black folks. And so you can say, well, that's systemic racism, and there might be some intentionality in that as well. No?
My turn?
Yeah, it's all you.
You never said black until you forced it in at the end. You never said, hey, we can make money if we lock black people up, so we go out looking for black people to lock up. See, what I take from that is it's racist because what you're saying, I know it's not your intent, but I'm taking the words because I'm a literal person. The words you just gave me was it's unfair to lock people up for low-level drugs. I'm on your side, right? But that's not the topic. The topic is race and systemic racism. It's unfair to lock people up for low-level drugs. But the state has incentivized local governments to do it, so they're doing it because they benefit from it. Still check. And therefore, obviously, they're going to lock up the black people because black people can't help themselves and must do drugs. Because the policy didn't say black. The policy, the incentive wasn't going to say black. So what you're saying unintentionally is that blacks can't help themselves. They must do drugs. Other groups don't have to say don't have to do drugs because. But true. Now let's be honest, because when you say that, well, obviously it's going to disproportionately affect blacks because blacks are the ones who are out there getting arrested because the blacks are doing drugs. It implies that blacks have to do drugs. They have no self-control. Right? Yeah. The drugs are available for everybody. Every American, just like every American has some opportunity, every American can go out and buy illegal drugs. Right. So now because remember, it's a common reframing of the black community that CIA and just drop drugs in the black community. Okay, not that it's true, but okay. Right. It's not true. Did they then go in at night and grab the drugs and then while you were sleeping, shoot it into your veins to make you an addict? It's not. So what I'm saying is, whatever the policy is, the policy didn't say black. The policy said lock up people who are in possession of 2 ounces of drugs, whether we agree with it or not. And
the suspicion is that they're actually targeting black communities. I know there's not a lot of evidence of that, other than the fact that most of the people that they're locking up are black people.
Because the people they're locking up the only way that's racist is if they're locking up, if they get incentivized to lock people up, and the people that they're locking up are majority black, and they're not carrying drugs.
Or they're just ignoring the drug problem in the white community because they'd rather lock up black people than white people.
And I think there's a we know that's not true.
But wait.
That I'm not true.
Let me ask you this though. Staying on criminal justice, is it true though that in general, if you had you picked up a black man for a crime and a white man for a crime, same crime, low level drugs. Let's stay on the low level drugs. That typically the black man gets a longer sentence than the white man.
Sometimes.
And if that, I feel like that's on average more so. And could that point to systemic racism?
Not really, because because these things are situational. So what people will do, they'll say, Charles and Dave both got arrested. They were both had the same background. So not even because somebody on the right will come out and say, well, maybe they had a different criminal history. Nope, same criminal history. They got different time. Did they see the same judge? Did they have the same drug? Were they in the same city? Because what we're doing statistical gymnastics, and we're taking numbers and swapping them around. So we already know states have different laws, right? We can disagree with the laws. So let's say Texas is a red state and it's more stern, and New York is a little bit more liberal on the crime. So they'll take a guy. They're not taking. I'm telling you, look it up. They're not taking. They'll have an instance, but they are not taking everybody from the same county in the same situation and taking 20 examples and setting them aside and saying this never happened. They're just taking blacks across the country with the same type of offenses and whites across the country, and then where they find discrepancies, they'll pull them in together and say, "See." So, but they're not in the same place. They're not all in the same state. They're not all with the. So, if you had those numbers and you only looked at a particular county, and you pulled in all that information, a lot of those discrepancies fall away. I'm telling you, I've seen all these numbers, and they'll say, "See, here's a."
I agree. A lot of what's claimed to be systemic racism, when you control for other factors, you realize it's not systemic racism. It can be, by the way, class factors. I mean, you look at that in the health outcomes. Yeah,
but I also want to. I don't understand why we focus so much on. And in most of the situations, like the healthcare is a good one. You can focus on the sickle cell thing. But a lot of times they want to focus on, it's asinine to me that you want to focus on bad behavior and who gets treated worse for the bad behavior. The problem with that is most of us aren't doing that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Well, okay, this is something that I struggle with a lot. This in my conversations. So, all right, a lot of this I think is class issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think it's the class issues. Let's just stay on drugs. Like I think you typically find people who are lower income kind of gravitating towards that. All right, I might be wrong.
Well, certain types of drugs. People with money do drugs too. They do different drugs.
You're actually right. You're actually right.
They like the party drugs.
Right.
They like the different
Yeah. All right. Let's street drugs, more poorer neighborhoods. It's more available.
Right.
Okay.
It's just cheaper. They're all available, but if you're poor, you can't afford an 8-ball of cocaine, but you can afford, crack because it's cheaper.
But would you agree, or am I totally off mark here, that you would typically find those in lower incomes more addicted and then crime, and then getting involved in crime? Is it typically a class thing?
Well, that's two separate things. Not more addicted necessarily, but more typically connected with the crime. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Well, then let's go. We'll stick with that then. Mm-hmm. So here's my question. And I know that, this is something I talk about all the time, and I struggle with this, is I know that there's no causality necessarily between slavery and crime today in the street. I know. I love your eyes. Because I'm reading your book. What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Wait for it. See, this is why you needed a drink.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, Charles. But that is, I'm going to your book now. That is the connection that a lot of people make, particularly 1619 Project. That slavery is the root of all evil. And so my conversation too in my writing is, okay, where is that causality there? But I do have to tell you that, if you buy the narrative, so correct me where I'm wrong. I'm going to tell you what the narrative is as perceived by Jennifer, and you tell me where to break that narrative. But if you buy the narrative that, slavery kept people down, then you had Jim Crow, there was all the redlining, and so there was less ability to capture wealth, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then those things take time. And so now we're 2021, and although there's these opportunities, I don't believe in 2021 we have the systemic racism, but my family, while we're not at all wealthy, but my family were ranchers, and we've got some land, and built on each other, yada yada yada. That some families weren't able to do that because of certain policies, and so now there's not a level playing field, and so you've got more minorities in poverty situations, in street drug situations, and therefore, there needs to be some consideration for our past in addressing some of the problems that we see today. Break that down. Tell me I'm wrong.
That was a mouthful.
I know. I'm sorry. Well, it was my turn to talk. I was really.
Well. Everything that you mentioned is true. But we don't live in a vacuum is the problem. And when you look at it that way, everything was true. Yes, it had long-lasting effects. And if you started out with less wealth than others, then you're never really going to make up that gap. Very few will, some will, but very few, very like small 1%. Will actually make up the gap of somebody, whose family now 3 or 4 generations later have so much more money. 2 problems with that. Even though it's true, I'm not discounting anything you said. Everything you said is factual and it's true, and it does have an effect. But one, it assumes that somehow, even minus slavery, that either people would have been in the same place financially as generational wealth is concerned, or they should have been. We act as though with our, blinders on, so focused on the ills of slavery and racism and the treatment of blacks. We act as though there were no, and are no, but were no, let's talk it generationally, there were no poor whites in this period of time. So I would argue that trying to fix that's all true, but trying to fix that and saying that it affects blacks today it's like I said to David, that something he said was technically it's racist against blacks because you're saying that blacks can't help themselves. They're all drug addicts, right? Which is not his and anybody else's intent, but that's what saying arresting people with drugs is racist. The policy is racist because even though it doesn't say black, because of course the colors are going to be the ones doing the drugs. Well, it's the same thing. But it's to white people. It's saying that if it wasn't for slavery, all black people would be Oprah. So that means you treated all black people poorly, which is crazy. Everybody wasn't going to be Oprah. But it also implies that if you're poor and you're white, then you're truly a screw up, because white privilege is across the board. Because Oprah would tell you even poor whites have white privilege. So if I'm a poor white, I'm like, they're saying, what the heck is wrong with you? You've had gold dropped on you your whole life for 3 generations and you're poor. Gosh, you're a loser. That's basically what that's saying. Because, and then to the stats, there are important stats out there that can give us good, clear ideas on what the root of the problem is and how to fix it. I don't think none of us, left, right, or center, look at the root of the problem. I try to, nobody else does. I'm the only one. Pay attention to me. So we talk about poverty. So do you know what percentage of blacks live in poverty in America right now?
Not that much.
1/3. Isn't 2/3 of the black community middle class or higher?
Yes, but I've got to say, every single person, don't feel bad because everybody does it unless they're a statistician. Every single person gets high. Everyone, black, white, Republican, Democrat, everybody gets high.
I'm gonna go with 15%.
Well, see, that's because you tried to say a third the first time. But yes, we're around 18 to 20%.
A third because, I caught myself because I realized that just because you're not middle class doesn't mean you're in poverty.
Right. But see, this is the key point, though. But this is why I say about numbers are important, but you need, are great. All the stats are great, but you need all the information, not just what somebody picked. So let's say poverty is 18 to 20% for blacks. Let's call it 18%. Might be a little higher because let's call it 18%. What is it for whites?
What is it for whites? I'm going to go with 11%.
That's pretty good. It's a little less than that, but people think, I've had people's guess, if I say, give me both, they say 40 and 6, 29 and 2, right? Because they think the disparity is so bad. So think about the racism. This is why it's important, you two, because you both really care. You want to try to solve this problem, right? So let's think of the root of the problem. Think about Jim Crow. Think about redlining. Think about the when people did make money in the early 1900s, the Tulsa Massacre, all these racist white people taking their stuff. Think about 100+ years of slavery. And for whites, it's like 7.5% to 9%. Right? So there's a discrepancy, but it's not like 40 and 10. So with all that, you're talking about a gap that's here. You talk about graduation rates from college, right? More and more blacks are going to college. There's still, but I think the last time I did it, when I researched for the book, I don't remember the number, but I think it's still close to 51. Just over half of the people don't have a degree, right? And that's white and black, right? So we live in this elite bubble where everybody's successful and everybody's moving around. And then we, as these elite whites, look at these poor black people. Well, most black people aren't poor and all white people aren't middle class. So if we're going to just focus on the mistreatments of black over the years, not just because it was wrong, but because it's still affecting black, it's not affecting every black person. And you're ignoring all the other people. Let's be real, the government was made up of people. So the system's not racist, but people in the system have done some really, really racist things and immoral things. And we've slighted a lot of people, Jews, Native Americans, Irish, and whites, women, white men. Most people, I like to throw out these stats. Some of these things are in the book that white men who didn't own property didn't get the right to vote through Andrew Jackson, the first populist president. So we keep saying white men couldn't vote for 100 and some years.
Right.
And then the women, this is try this on. We all know this, but we don't let it sit on us. White women got to vote 70 years after black men. So the black male slave got to vote before the white woman. She couldn't own property. Right. That's what I'm saying. So if we're gonna right the wrongs, we gotta right all the wrongs. So then we just all broke because we spent all our money righting wrongs, and then China and Russia just come and beat us over the head because we're wasting our time righting wrongs. Suck it up.
Yeah, well that's its own issue.
Can I ask a question here? So you've said before that you haven't really been that pilloried by other people. One of the things that I've been criticized a lot for is that we're cherry picking a very small minority of black voices to highlight because they don't really, the real representative voices are much more woke, much more left wing, and they're the authentic representations. And here you are, given a narrative that's very different than that. And so I'm trying to hold it up, lift it up, and make it sound like that's the authentic voice of the Black community or whatever. What do you think about that? Like, how, if you go back to the people, your friends, extended family, like if you take and they hear this podcast, are they going to be like, what percentage of them are going to be shaking their head like Charles is like screwing us? And to what percentage of them, sorry if I don't know if that makes Jennifer's language rules. I don't know if that's she's more sensitive about those things than I am. And to what degree are those people going to say, yeah, Charles is making sense here?
Vast majority will agree with me. You know what?
Whoa.
Because here's the thing.
I'm gonna drink. I'm gonna have to have another drink. I'm sorry. 1 second.
No, here's the important thing. Not on everything, but on my premise. I've done. I write articles. I've been on TV. Every time my friends, they eye me and they text me. And I was like, yeah, I agree. Or the ones who are more politically engaged and more liberal would say, I wanted to be mad at whatever you said, but I agree with every word you said, because they disagree with you politically because they're so stuck in the political ideology. But in general reference, everything I'm saying is true. My message is technically a pro-Black message. You can spin what I said as a negative, but if you take it out, like you say, cherry pick. If you cherry pick what I actually said and take out my explanation, if you just took out the facts I said, what I said is stop saying all Black people do drugs and that we don't have any agency and we can't control ourselves. That's racist. Stop saying we're all poor. We're not poor. Stop saying that we should. You keep talking about shootings in the community. Yes, we have an issue in our community, but you do know 98% of Blacks don't commit violent crime. So you're only talking about this many people committing crime, but all the talk in the white community is about how Black community is so violent. The Black community is not violent, right? And their reply is like, yeah, because I lived in the hood my whole life, and I'm comfortable, and I never had an issue. So they know it's true because of what I'm saying. Is stop acting like we're weak and we're dumb and we're criminals. Because that's what the narrative is saying. Now, they may disagree with me on, whether the government should pay back this, that, or the other. And I'm not even saying that the government doesn't owe anything. I'm saying if you think that's going to fix something, good luck with that. I'll be on the other side counting my cut of the money, talking about what are you going to do when this happens. So that's one thing. The other point to what you're saying, and I don't say that. I say this sometimes. Read the preface to my first book, and I talk about this, but when I wrote that, it was a different time. So now it's different because obviously I've been elevated to at least be able to rub elbows with some of these people, and they're really bright, and I like them. But I've challenged a lot of academics, Black and non, people who push back against this stuff. And I said, we need to get this out to the masses because the problem is twofold. We have academics speaking to other academics. So they might have a great solution to a problem, but the regular people don't hear it. But the other problem is that the Black voices that speak logically and clearly from the right are all college professors. So yes, you're going to get that, Uncle Tom thing, that kind of blah, 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 the kind of whatever, because they're like, yeah, he's only saying it because he's making it. I'll be honest, you need to elevate voices that didn't go to Harvard. So I don't get it because I'm not a college professor. I don't get it because I don't, approach things in a way that would make them say that, not that they do, like the people that I associate with myself with don't, but there are Black conservatives out there that other Blacks think that, not that they're wrong, but I don't like their approach because they put down other Blacks. So if you don't approach it from that standpoint, then you get a different response. And lastly, to your average person, go listen to my podcast. I interviewed my brother. My brother is a blue collar worker who didn't go to college, and he sounds exactly like me. Less animated though, but he says the same things. Don't feel haunted. Don't have a problem with police. Don't think that, I don't go around saying all white people are racist and most people are fine. Some people are not, but the people who aren't are just bad because they're jerks, not because they're white jerks, right? We don't need to cover the jokes. The jerks. I think the average Black person is like the average white person. There's a joke I used to say to my white friends. I was like, you get a kick out of this. A lot of Black people, unfortunately, they think that you all go home Friday after work. You get your drink, you hold your beer, pour that wine, and then you go to your friends and you go, Black people, right? They actually, there's a large segment now, not the other stuff that they don't, give me a hard time, like you said, Dave. But there's a large percentage of the Black community that think that, right? And I would joke that my mom's one of them. I would joke, I'm like, what do you think they're saying? They honestly have such, and I say this narcissism. They think that you talk about them all the time. I say, you know what white people do when they go home? They bitch about their boss. They talk about, I wish I had a different job. They talk about where we're going to go on vacation. They talk about what the kids are going to do, because they do in life what all the rest of us do. They don't have time to be talking about the Black man. The problem is, this is why I call it narcissistic. Your problem is, I'm talking to the Black people who talk like that, is that you think it's like, it was the precursor to anti-woke. I wrote this in my book before anti-racism, before people started talking about anti-racism. I saw it coming about 7 years ago. Find that book. It's called Logic, The Truth About Blacks in the Republican Party. And what I said was that Black people feel that is not being racist is not enough. If you're not actively talking about Black people all the time, then you're a racist. So if you don't sit around saying, so what can we do about poor Blacks, then you're a racist. This is before people started talking about anti-racism. I wrote that. I said, you are so narcissistic that if a white man's not talking about you, it's the same as being a racist saying, I hate Black people. Saying I hate Black people is racist, and not talking about us all the time is also racist. That's silly. Why do you want them to talk about you all the time? They have their own lives to live. You don't sit around talking about them all the time.
But you know what? You know what's so funny? Because of media, because of everything that you said, because the media has really placed this emphasis on this very small segment of society, and they've created this narrative around Black life. Now, a lot of white people believe, same narcissism, that at the end of the day, at the end of Friday, Black man goes home and goes, white people.
Right. We go home and say, give me a beer. We say the same thing. We go, give me a beer. Say, what did you do at work, man? I got on my nerves.
Yes.
Whatever. If they're single, like, who am I going to date? It's typical stuff.
Yes.
They don't care about that kind of stuff. And it's harmful to believe that, right? So you think, and let me tell you, the other unknown secret is Blacks love their lives. They think it's cool to be Black. They like the fact that white people want to dance like them, want to listen to their music. They're like, oh, you all so cool. You got this swag. They love it. They eat it up and they love it. They know it. They think it's cool. They think we drive the culture. People follow us for fashion. All that stuff is cool. Yeah. So why you complain about your life? By
the way, can I tell you something? I heard a great point the other day that Black people, person for person, are the most in America are the most culturally influential people in the world by far,
and
not even close. Yeah, but it's not. They may tell you, but it's true, absolutely true. Yeah, because I mean, if you look at the percentage of music, the percentage of culture that really stems from Black culture in America, and then that's exported because it's America to everywhere else in the world.
Right.
So I think that's fascinating. By the way, I'm on my cell phone internet here, just so you know, because we have a big thunderstorm.
In the
background. Well, this thunderstorm in the background.
This is the first of many conversations I feel with Charles. So with your thunderstorm coming on, maybe that's our wrap for our Friday night. But any final questions though for Charles? This is fast. It's so nice to speak, just to
not edit yourself as you go along. Just have conversations. We need to. I want to do something at some point. Model conversations, give examples of how to speak like a real human being to other people, so that and without walking on eggshells, and that becomes the new norm again. Anyway,
I see a series with us three.
Ooh, I can do that.
How to not walk on eggshells.
And I would leave people with the notion that to keep remembering that Black life is good. Black life is not bad. Stop buying into Julianne Moore telling you we're all being gunned down in the streets. Don't believe LeBron. Most Black people aren't walking around afraid to go walk in the park. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true.
Okay,
not true. I don't know a Black person that believes that. Don't know one. And I would stop being their friend if they did. I can't be a friend with somebody who's afraid to go out the house. What are you talking about? You're afraid to go out? What are you talking about? Well, I'm not afraid, but the cops are racist. Okay, now I got friends who will say that. But then I'm like, are you afraid of them? No. Because they don't even really believe it themselves. They're just saying it. They don't believe that crap. They're fine. They'll be fine.
In our next conversation, we have to go over race crazy a little bit more. You do a brilliant job. We will have that conversation. I mean, I'm just going to give a teaser for that conversation. your breakdown of the money that goes into the movement for Black lives is shocking. So there you go. That's the teaser for next time, because we have to have that conversation before the
and Google the movement for Black lives, because most people don't know what it is.
Holy crap, y'all. Okay, teaser. We're having Charles back. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
All right. Part 2 coming up.
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate being here.
This ends this week's Hold My Drink and Counterweight podcast. But for the curious, I share this week our outtakes. But fair warning, this is a trigger warning, if you will. The rest is real talk with a hot mic. So feel free to turn off the podcast now or proceed at your own discretion. I'll cut it there. But yeah, Charles, this is this has got to be the first.
Did you even get to 1619 yet?
No, okay. I'm actually
I'll be done by Friday.
I know. I'm a liar. I'm a little freaking liar. And by the way, speaking of which, here, I'm a little fucking liar, David. There you go. There's my
no, she turned off the
offline. It does not count.
That's what I'm saying. She turns off the camera. Now she's just
yeah, exactly. Now I can curse.
Fox. Now she's Red Fox. Oh, hello there. I think she just said nigger. I can't believe that.
Did she really?
No. Look at her. I just wanted to see her face. There's nothing funny. I gotta say, one of my things jokes is there's nothing funnier than Black people just saying nigger to white people. It's funny. Especially since now even Black people say the N-word, and I'm like, no. I used to walk into work in the corporate America, they'd be like, where did the niggers go? And they'd be like, you can't say that. I'm like, why? I'm Black. I can say whatever I want. You all created this stupid culture. I'm gonna milk it for all it's worth, nigger.
I think that the acceptable now is if a white person doesn't use a hard R, that it's borderline maybe acceptable.
All right, get yourself canceled and see what happens.
Yeah, Chris Rock says only at like 4:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve can a white person do it after he's like been beaten to a pulp.
I used to work with a guy, and I would keep saying it. And I was like, because I'm trying to get him to say it. If I keep saying it enough times, you're gonna accidentally let it slip. Like for real. Like I only use the term just to make white people uncomfortable because it's so stupid. I don't care. But yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, you were going to give me some random excuse as to why you couldn't read the book. Like my power went out.
My power went out. Yeah, I know. David dropping off because his power went out. Now, I believe the thunderstorm. No, I had some family. I'm on 1619 now, and we need to talk 1619 because you've seen that I've written 1619. So that is even another. That is even another conversation.
And it was every essay, just like mine was.
Yes, because we're like great minds and stuff.
Yeah.
So that has got to be its own podcast. So I'm actually on it, and it really will be done this week. I'm a week late. It really will be done.
But I'm telling you, when you read, you might not even want to read the rest after you read my parallel to Nicole Hannah Jones, because I felt that's laying the groundwork. She's the founder. It's the longest essay. I'm going in. So I think it's twice as long as any other chapter in the book. Just me killing Nicole Hannah Jones.
Mm-hmm. We've got to when we have
family and family. So she talks about. I don't know if you read the essay, David.
Yes.
But she talked about her father went out there. So I said, fine. I'm gonna talk about my father. My father versus your father. Both Black in America. Let's go. My father's older than your father, so he grew up even older than you did. Let's talk about that. And so I write about it. It's about the way he grew up, all that kind of stuff. It's funny. It's and you know that's the point that where it shifts. That in the movement for Black lives mostly because people don't know about it.
Well, that to me so far, not going on the 1619 yet is I mean,
I had never heard of it when I did it. When I started the book without knowing what it was. I started writing the book. My goal was I got a pitch from the publisher saying, I want you to write a book about 1619, like all the stuff they're about. BLM, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, so I'm writing about BLM. And then I'm trying to find some stuff. And I'm like, I don't see anything else. They don't really say anything. It's just a couple of pictures. There's nothing here. Right. And I'm like, and then I find something. And then I find this site. It's almost like when you watch those tech movies about these hackers. And you click a button and all these files start opening. You can't stop them from opening. So there's all this treasure trove of stuff and legislation and all these quotes. But they're not on the BLM site. So nobody's ever seen them.
Right.
Because everybody's going to BLM and say, let's see what they say. It doesn't say anything.
And it's the money. It's the money. And you made a point that I even wrote this down was I was going to ask you, has the movement been co-opted and used for a platform for another agenda? Because you say it sounds more like something that Bernie Sanders would say than Malcolm X.
Right. It doesn't say anything about, I mean, they don't even talk about police anymore. No, it was founded on police brutality. They don't talk about police.
They don't talk about police. Or the black man. It's all
cis, what's the word they made up?
Cis,
I used like
hetero.
Cis hetero patriarchy.
Yeah.
Cis hetero patriarchy. I'm like, what is that? But they used it like 5 times.
Which makes it think that it has been co-opted for another agenda.
They say trans, queer, LGBT.
Oh, you
women,
lay it out.
Femme, yeah.
All which are fine, but it's like the fact that it's hidden.
Yeah, but they never say men. But they gave a 2-paragraph list of the people that they're fighting for, and they never say men. Mm-hmm. But black men are the ones supposedly being shot in the street, not black women.
Yeah.
And Jews, by the way, for the record, David, Jews. They mention Muslims, they mention Muslims, they mention Christians negatively, and then they don't mention Jews.
Yeah.
We complicate their lives a little bit.
But look, they took out you should be happy. They took down the BDS.
Right. The movement. Yeah, the movement had that whole platform. Right? Yeah, you can't find it anymore. Like I've tried. I'm like, this thing has disappeared. I don't. You know what? I have a theory about that. Can I tell you? I have a theory about this whole thing. I think that if you go back to 2016 when that original platform was issued by the Movement for Black Lives, that at that time Black Lives Matter thought of itself as an intersectional movement, that they were going to be helping others. I think today it's no longer an intersectional movement, even in the Kimberly Crenshaw sense. I think it is a centering Black lives movement, and that means it's almost and that's no longer about intersectionality. It's like, so if you say, well, I've been impressed too, they're saying, no, we're going to center Black lives right now. And so I think it's actually shifted gears since then.
You're going to love this. We should have a conversation about this. Jennifer, I don't know how far she got in the book, but I think she can tell what I'm about to say. I totally disagree with you. I think it's the exact opposite of what you said. I think it was founded on blackness, founded like I think blacks are being shot and it's unfair. I'm giving them the benefit, right? It's founded on black. This is what I don't think I wrote this in this book. I wrote it last book. I think some black people got together. They thought Trayvon got the shaft. They thought police were bad. They said, we should do something pro-black. All about the black man, right? And then it's like, we should raise money. And some George Soros type, came up and said, look, I like what you all doing. And you're going to need some money to really push this forward. I can make that happen. So how much have you raised? We raised $26,000. Well, look, I'll give you $5 million, but I'm going to need you to put some other shit on your platform. Well, $5 million? Oh, what do you want me to put on there? You can stick with the black thing. You can be black heavy, BLM, put your fist up there. But I'm going to need some BDS and some more liberal political stuff on your site. For $5 million? Okay. So that's what I think. I think it happened the other way. I think they truly wanted to be focused on blacks, and they got bought out, right? So the people saw an opportunity, the hard left saw an opportunity to use this to Trojan horse some other stuff.
Yeah,
the 3 women were lesbians.
Well,
so
that's for sure.
Part.
That last part's for sure. That the hard left, the non-black hard left, said, "Okay, we're going to ride this wave as long as we possibly can."
You're saying, Dave, you think Alicia Garza and Patrisse Cullors came up with cis hetero patriarchy?
Yeah, they're kind of Marxist. I mean, they call themselves Marxist.
They're not smart enough to come up with the term. They're not that smart.
Yeah, okay, so they brought some other folk in to do that, but right? But
you think that's why they opened with BDS and then went the other way. They took the BDS off because it started to hurt them, but they opened because somebody paid them to do it. So it was like, if you're going to take my money,
that is possible. I 100% possible. Okay, I added my own mind.
Black now, and in the end, now you said, and then they shifted to this all black thing. They're not black now. They're all intersexual now. They're all like,
no,
everybody,
they're not.
every group. Oh,
no,
yeah,
no. You hear the centering blackness.
Go to a rally and tell me who's there.
All right. I want to investigate that further. That is something I want to investigate further.
So you need to read the book and then we investigate it, and that's our next conversation.
Okay.
All right.
Talk to you all later. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Charles. This was a lot of fun. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say, hold my drink, and the conversation gets real.